a small group, but we might as well go ahead and get started. It looks like biology is showing up in force. Yay, biology.
Crystal's chemistry.
Sorry.
I am. I'm like that weird biochemist.
Oh, okay, so you are a biochemist at least, right? So I'm not completely off base. So
I like both equally, but chemistry has my heart.
okay. Yay, biology and chemistry. Yay, sciences coming through for us today.
Big turnout.
So it might be a short discussion. So our conversation today is more just guided by the faculty and what you're interested in talking about. I do have some comments that I want to share. Unfortunately, Chris Greer couldn't join us, but she's been hearing comments from the RAs, the RDs, and some of the other people, the feedback that they're hearing from students about their experiences so far. So I do want to share that with you too. And then we can, oh, Matt's already got a slide for that. Wow, I'm impressed. But then we can really take the conversation where you want, because it is a small group, that we can share how you want. So as Matt's slide very succinctly summarizes, Chris is hearing experiences from the people in the residence halls and from Jan Cooper in the counseling center. We suspect that these comments tend to be weighted toward those from on-campus students who are probably younger students, probably more in the 1 and 200 level classes, at least the ones that are coming from the residence halls, because this isn't any sort of formal or scientific survey. But at least for what Chris is hearing so far, students they're still happy when they have face-to-face experiences or things that are as close to face-to-face as possible. So here's what the comments say. So from Jan Cooper in the counseling center, the biggest complaint from students is being frustrated that not all classes are synchronous. The asynchronous classes are the ones they're struggling in to comprehend, maintain attention, and see them as a poor method of comprehending for those who are not strong at self-learning. They describe the classes as not what they were told college would be like this semester. They understand COVID-19 issues, but school is too expensive for self-learning. I am going to resist the urge to editorialize at some of this because self-learning, I think, is something that's worth paying for, but okay, so I didn't resist the urge to editorialize. I will go back to reading my script. They would prefer seeing, interacting with their classmates and the professor during each class like it was face-to-face, synchronous. The classes they like are the ones with the professors who are holding classes synchronous. These classes are engaged in discussion, live lectures, breakout groups, etc., like a face-to-face class. Another concern that has been brought up is that some synchronous classes, the students are told to turn off the video to better support the video feed. It seems the system is overwhelmed, according to their instructor. I do not believe asynchronous learning will be successful for our students. A lot of students who come to NMU already have difficulty in learning, self-discipline, and other struggles. These adverse events will academically increase anxiety, depression, and substance abuse over the long term. So that's the comment from one of the counselors. And then we have several comments coming from the residence halls. And so these are comments gathered from RDs and their staff. First comment, I'm hearing that students are really grateful to have any in-person class they can. It is just a completely different experience for them. And I think that alone just stresses them out, especially when it affects their grades. Every professor's expectations for how students adapt is different, and that does not make it easy for students. That is where the anxiousness comes in. Second comment, Confusion over when in-person segments of classes are taking place, lack of clarity on when online assignments, tests, quizzes, projects are due, no advance notice or appropriate time given for assignments due online. It says in parentheses, emailing 2 hours before the assignment is opened up and then closing before the student is out of work or other classes. Another comment, the students say they are getting the hang of it, but that their professors are just assuming that the students are hanging around all day waiting to get last-minute assignments without remembering that they have jobs, are not always tuned into their emails, and that they're not given time to ask clarifying questions always. Adding to the confusion is that each professor is sometimes using a different program to turn in assignments, so there's not central place for them to keep track of everything. I've been thinking about doing an online find your organizational style tutorial to help with this. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Another comment, I do have some students who say that emailing their professors has gotten a lot better than it was before, than it was pre-COVID, and that there are some really understanding professors out there that are giving their students ample time to get into the swing of things, geography, athletic training, and social work specifically. So yay, geography, athletic training, and social work. That was, last part was me editorializing again. Students have said that they feel like they're missing something much of the time. They're confused often. Okay, editorializing again. I frequently feel confused, but going back to the comment. The students who are in hands-on classes feel like not a lot is getting done. For those who are online, they're reporting that learning online is not how all of them learn, so they're concerned that they won't do well. In addition, due to the lack of communication from professors, they're struggling to ask for help. Students have said that due dates and homework are not clear, and so it's confusing to know when and where to turn assignments in, especially for freshmen who haven't experienced what college is like. Much of their professors aren't acknowledging their lack of experience and aren't giving them clear instructions. Next comment. I definitely have some students who are frustrated about online classes and managing that, but I also have students who are anxious about being in person for some classes, particularly those that will be severely impacted once the weather gets colder. So I don't have any overwhelming response so far from students, but a lot more of a mixed bag. And final comment, overall, my students seem to be stressed about school and staying very busy with schoolwork. In-person classes seem to be going well. Online classes are causing a lot of stress. So that's our feedback from the Dean of Students and what she's hearing. Since we have a small group, I guess we can invite you to share what you're seeing and what you're doing to mitigate some of these issues, or even where you're feeling stressed and anxious. Oh, and Matt's got this under control too. I'm going to stop talking for a while and just let Matt take over.
I can go first.
Even better.
Okay, so I'm teaching discussion for general chemistry. So classes of like maybe 20 to 25-ish students in person. And then I'm teaching 3 sections of biochemistry lab. So all of my students, I see them, but they meet me, but then the rest of their class is online or like the weird lecture schedule. Sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. So I've been seeing a lot of what the comments are saying, like freshmen or transfer students that don't even know how to look up their schedule on MyNMU. They didn't even know what classroom they were supposed to be in. You know, really hard time organizing their work of when do I do these activities. So I saw a lot of that. It felt like the first week was like a, you know, start to school, but it was online. Then the second week was another start to school and another new transition, because then we were kind of supposed to see each other. And now we're in week 3 and we're already, you know, getting close to having exams, and we were so busy with communication and figuring out how to do this that it took a lot of time away from the learning. So my upper level lab students, they seem to be doing fine because they're juniors and seniors, and I think they just get the hang of it more. But my 111 students, I'm getting a lot more questions that I haven't had before, and I think would normally go to the lecture professor who oversees the whole course, but they never get to see his face because he's having asynchronous, you know. So I'm the new go-to person, which I've always been there for them, but I'm getting a lot more questions and they're relying on me a lot more than they have in the past. The one thing that I've done so far for them, well, not the one thing, these are things that I have done for them. I have on their EduCap pages Zoom meetings that I've told them they can use to study. At the very beginning, I started a discussion forum for every class, and we did an introduce yourself post, which was mixed. Like some students did not do it, but and then every time I get an email, I'm saying, can you post this to the discussion forum so other students can see my response? And then I sent out a note, did you know NMU has a tutoring center? And then I made these short videos about my time management strategies, and I sent that to them. So how to look up my NMU schedule and what to do with it. And then I told them for this many credit hours, you should be, you know, like a 4-credit class means 8 to 12 hours a week, and this is how you should schedule it. So that's what I have done so far, and I think it's getting a little bit better, but then maybe I don't know because I'm not having 100% of the students tell me how they're doing. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of get a sense, but then you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. I'm done.
So Crystal, have you had any quizzes or tests yet? I'm really interested in your
Yes.
comment about there's
Yeah.
so much going on just with communication and adjustment that there's less time for learning. What are you seeing
Yeah.
as far as their performance on quizzes and other assessments?
In biochem, we haven't really gotten to that yet. In Gen Chem, they've already had 2 quizzes, and one of my 3 sections had an exam yesterday that I proctored. So I still have to grade those. To that point, you know, a lot of them, maybe they don't know what a syllabus is and how to use it. Because I'm guessing most people put dates in there, and in my discussions, I told them this is what's going to happen each week. You should expect to have a quiz open this date. It's going to close this date. So the communication has gotten out there, but you had those comments about, well, they are struggling just being able to manage their email. And so they feel like the communication is late where we feel like we have been communicating. So there's that disconnect. And I think overall, anywhere you go, communication is huge, and you should always over communicate like 200 or 300%, because, you know, some people just aren't getting it. Even if they hear the message the first time, they're not interpreting it in their brain, and they need to hear it over and over. And we're not used to that. Like there's so much extra time as faculty now that we need to devote just to communication, where if we saw them every time in the classroom, it seems to take less time. Does that make sense? So I understand what they're saying. They're feeling like it's last minute and they weren't told, where on our part, we did tell them, but we need to tell them 2 or 3 more times for them to get it. And even when we tell them the message and they read it, they're not in the moment of it putting it into practice. So again, they're just not figuring out, you're saying this, what does that mean for me, for my day-to-day schedule? They're not connecting the dots.
So I think Crystal has a really good point about the syllabus. And there's a t-shirt I saw for sale somewhere that I haven't been quite snarky enough to actually purchase, but it says something like, "It's in the syllabus." And I was talking yesterday, earlier this week sometime anyway, to someone who is really organized with the course she teaches, and the assignment dates are listed in the syllabus, and the students were commenting in class about not knowing what was coming up. And this person mentioned that she didn't open up the assignments, all the assignments in EDUCAT at the same time, because she had found in the past that if she did that, students would not drop the assignments in the right location. So she just had the soonest ones coming up, maybe a couple open, but the dates for everything else were in the syllabus. And I think that getting some way to convince students to like read and use the syllabus would be really helpful.
How much of that do you think is obviously this reading a syllabus is always a challenge in communication. How much of do you think the confusion this year is any different than in the past? Is it because the first week was different because it was online? Any sense about what we could do differently as faculty members to help get through?
It is challenging because if you're not seeing them in person, you have these online things, and if they're not interacting with the online spaces, how do you ever get that message? Because you're never having them go to a classroom where you can tell them, go to EDUCAT. This is what the email message is going to look at, because the only way you can communicate with them is through those modes. So do their, maybe, okay, so you asked like, what can we do? Can the resident advisors do that for them since we cannot?
And maybe that partially goes to the students' interest in having especially the earlier the younger students having more of a synchronous session, so they do kind of get that repetitive communication too.
One suggestion that people might want to consider is employing some of those online course techniques even for introducing materials, even if the course isn't fully online. I'm thinking primarily of doing some type of course walkthrough, like recording a video in Camtasia that it explains the layout of your course and what your expectations are, something to complement the syllabus, because really all that stuff is probably in your syllabus, but maybe not the pointing out where things are. We do have EDUCAT, general EDUCAT informational videos out there for students, but everybody lays out their course a little different, so it can be useful to explain to students like you would if you were in class, except you're not, how your course works and where they should look for certain things.
I have another suggestion that faculty may want to consider that that I found some success with. Now, I've been performing this process every semester, that I've taught, regardless of which mode I deliver a course. I administer a 5-question survey each and every week. It's simple. It's actually in our showcase course, and it's a way that students can identify when were they confused, when were they not, what did they like, what didn't they like. It gives them a forum to be able to offer their opinions. And what I do is I gather all of this feedback. I sift through it every single week. I post it publicly. I ask the students if there's something they would prefer not be posted, then let me know that, and I won't. But it provides the students with this collective forum of being able to share with one another. And if there's something, I learn a great deal from this survey. For instance, last week, students that didn't have their earbuds or headphones with them, this was a modified hybrid course. So simultaneously, I had 13 students in front of me, 12 students in Zoom land. And if students in person didn't have their listening devices plugged into Zoom, and the in-person students had questions or they were contributing to class, the students, of course, in Zoom couldn't hear. And while I was trying to do some repeat, so therefore the Zoom students could hear what was going on, I didn't do it the entire time. So some of the Zoom students felt as though they were missing some things from in person. It gave them that forum to be able to share that with me, and not that they wouldn't share it with me anyway, but I think it's that one space they know that they can always, you know, provide that kind of feedback. And like I said, it's weekly, so it isn't, I mean, there are other ways to gather that feedback more quickly, but at least they know every week that they have that opportunity that they can, you know, offer suggestions or at least just share their thoughts about how they're feeling at the moment. And sometimes it does become that, sharing about the stress of the pandemic and coming to class and being concerned for, you know, health and welfare. So, but I think us listening and having that opportunity to you know, capture that information, I think is really valuable. Just a suggestion, something I found is helpful on this end.
I think that's a good idea, Stacy, especially when maybe they're afraid to talk. So, sorry, kind of like too many thoughts at once. So all my classes with the first years or like the transfers or whatever, the Gen Chem students, I asked them, you know, what questions do you have? What concerns are coming up? And everybody was silent. But your method might make them feel safer in sharing those thoughts. So I like your idea.
I'm going to follow up a little bit to what Matt said, and Crystal, what you said. Crystal, your point that one of your points that struck me as being very significant was we really had 2 startup weeks. And for the new students, the transfers and the freshmen, and given the change, all the changes with the pandemic, it really isn't any wonder that they're bewildered. I mean, if you think about it. And I know when I've taught UN 100 in the past, I'm usually blessed with teaching junior level students, but when I've taught UN 100, it's a completely different group. And they really do need a lot of hand-holding, a lot of almost helicopter parenting, taking over that role of what their parents used to do in terms of being a teacher. And I completely agree with you with helping them with time management, where to figure out simple things such as their schedule. And we used to do a lot of that in UN 100. We actually taught them how to do some of it. So I think some of what we're seeing is a reaction from that population to the weird startup that we had. And then some of it is just what they would have experienced even in a normal academic year, because of transitioning to college is such a huge change for them. The comments also that Chris had included, that they're surprised how much learning they have to do on their own. That happens pretty much every fall with incoming high school students as they adjust to the out of class work assignments, homework, time commitment. So some of that I think is just normal transition. And then some of this, of course, has this whole COVID layer of complexity on top of it. We do have, and Matt's idea was excellent, we do have also in the showcase, faculty showcase course, we have some excellent videos that faculty have done of course overviews where they kind of walk students through. That's helpful. I also used this summer, had a syllabus quiz that they could take more than once for some low course points, and that seemed to be a way to encourage people to actually read the syllabus, because most students don't, and then they don't know the schedule and they don't know what's coming. So that would be another thing that faculty could do to encourage students to actually read the syllabus.
So I just sent a message to ACAC asking them about what they're requiring for first year experience this year. There were a few years where everybody was required to take UN 100 as an in-person small section, and as management and budget for that evolved, then it went to large lectures and then moved to an online non-credit experience last year. So I'm not sure what they're being required to do this year and how far along they would be. I'm kind of curious about that, because it seems like to some extent it would be, knowing what's in that may help faculty reinforce the need for students to do that, and then be able to reflect back on it to say you should be doing, if you have primarily first year students, to kind of be pointing them toward that, reminding them to engage with it, to get some advice on time management or syllabus use. But I'm not sure what's in it, so I'll let you know when I hear back from ACAC.
I'm
So we
sure
have
they can give you a more complete answer as to what their overall program is, but I do know that they have a first year experience, self-paced course that students had to go through over the summer. That puts a registration hold on, so they needed to complete that to get registered.
So John, what are you seeing?
Sorry, Leslie?
Oh, I forgot we had two Johns. Dr. Brugink. Dr. Brugink, what are you seeing? Oh, did we lose?
John, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So I have two small courses that are both face-to-face, but then my larger one I'm doing is modified. And I guess I was mostly attending here to see what other folks' experiences are, because I'm finding it just sort of challenging having half of them there and half of them not, roughly. I don't know. So far, it almost seems worse to me than doing it entirely Zoom. And maybe that's not the students' perception, but I don't really have a good feel for that yet. They've been extremely quiet, and they have been showing up on the days that it's their turn. But I sort of feel like whatever I'm doing, I'm ignoring half the students, and it's a strange feeling and somewhat disorienting. I don't know how it is for them, but yeah, some of these, I like the idea of maybe doing a survey to sort of get a better handle on that, because maybe they're fine. It's an upper level class, so I'm not facing some of the challenges that the rest of you maybe are facing with first year students and so on. But yeah, so I'm just finding it challenging personally.
John, I can add to that and completely relate, because I also am teaching a modified on campus, and I have 21 students with me and 21 attending remotely. And it is very disorienting, I think is a good word. I will talk for maybe 15 or 20 minutes and then, or sometimes 30, and then remember all of a sudden that, hey, I have this other group and I need to start calling on some of the people in the other part of the class. I like Stacy's idea of doing a survey. I did ask students after my first session if anyone would give me any feedback about how it went from their side, particularly the Zoomers. And I had one student who came to my virtual office hours, and she gave me some really good suggestions. And one of the issues is visual. I can't see if I'm using a PowerPoint, because of the size limitations and having only one monitor, I can't see most of my Zoom audience. Most of the students choose to turn off their video, so all I have is their name. Yeah. And I also had trouble, because I like to have my PowerPoint in presenter mode. I also had problems with their little images overriding my notes and my next slide. I also couldn't manage the chat box. And I kept saying to the students, what are you seeing? Can you hear me? So the student that joined me had some great ideas. She said, why don't you assign one of the students, or ask somebody who you can see their screen, if they can be your feedback person to validate that the slides are visible and that the microphone is working. And then ask that person if they can take a look at the chat box in case you miss any chat. So that worked really well. I did that my second class period, and I had a student very willing to do that. So that was one suggestion. I do find myself having to repeat, and that's hard to remember for the in-class students. If they answer a question, or ask me a question, I need to repeat it for my Zoom audience. And if there was some way, Pat, that we could help with that, that would be wonderful. Stacy DeLuce came to my class on Saturday morning. We had a scheduled appointment, and she helped me to adjust the microphone a little bit and the room volume. And I was able to capture the students on Zoom, their comments. I was able to make those, the people in the room could hear those comments. So I was able to fix that problem. So it's really the communication going from the room students to the ones on Zoom that I'm struggling with. I have not asked the people in the room to wear earbuds and headphones and plug into Zoom yet. I'm thinking about doing that, but then another part of me says, well, if I'm going to have everybody join via Zoom, why are we meeting physically in the class?
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. However, the students might like that. The student also did give me feedback, and I asked people that were hanging around a little after class on Friday what they thought of how it was going, and they think it's fine. They liked it. They thought things were fine. From a personal standpoint, I don't like not having coffee and water with me in the room. That's very difficult to speak for 2 hours without being able to take a sip of something. I'm overheating in the mask. My glasses are fogging up, makes it hard to see the students in the room. And I'm also having difficulty hearing my in-class students because of the mask that they're wearing. I have to keep asking them to speak louder. And then part of it is the loss of the nonverbal communication, which the masks greatly impair. So those are some of the struggles that I'm having with the modified class. And if Pat, if you have any ideas on Lakenin for how to make the audio better, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, the simple solution is, put microphones in every classroom, but that's not cost effective and it's not a simple solution. It's more complex than that. We're trying to brainstorm ideas. There's been a couple of ideas that faculty and other people have brought up. I don't think there's a perfect solution there's no magic bullet. Some things will work for some people, some not for others. It depends on the size of the room, what you're trying to do. Unfortunately, to get somebody picked up on the audio, they need to be near a microphone. And if you think about our problem with social distancing, what we're trying to do is get people away from each other. So that means more microphones. And putting that many microphones in every classroom on campus is quite momentous. It's not just the microphones. They all have to go to processing because they have to know which mic's on. That's why we only have the 3 distant learning rooms on campus. To do that effectively and to do it the right way is pretty expensive and probably not feasible for the university to stomach the cost to do that. Not to mention the time. It's not going to happen this semester. It would be a very lengthy summer project, and hopefully we don't have to think about that next summer and everything's somewhat more normal. There are some options with having like a USB microphone, and then it gets to a level that it would be more complex than I think the faculty would want to deal with. Eric had a good point in a meeting we had earlier today. He said, we could do all kinds of different things if we wanted to turn this into let's experiment with AV technology in every class, but I don't think anybody wants to waste their time doing that either. I would say, if you have ideas, let us know. We're coming up with ideas. The ideas, it doesn't really matter where they come from as long as it's a good idea that we can share with others. I think that's probably the best we can do right now. And there's been some creative ideas and some things have worked, some haven't. And that's about the best I can tell you for right now, Lisa. And we knew it was going to be a problem. I mean, when we were working this summer, said, what's going to probably be the biggest problem? Well, everybody can see each other. Video is usually the easy thing. The hard thing is audio. I think audio has worked okay from the faculty to the distant students, from the faculty to the in-class students. That's why we added all the microphones, because there was, concern about the masks and plexiglass. So that part of it has not seemed to be much of an issue. It is the students in the class being able to be heard with the students that are on Zoom. And yeah, we knew it'd be a problem. We weren't sure how faculty were going to use Zoom either, because faculty were left to decide how they wanted to treat those students. and not told they had to use Zoom. You know, some people are flipping their classroom, as you know, recording and doing things and just having their discussion in class when they're there. And each faculty, as you know, is unique and they have their own unique circumstances. So it's hard to have a one size fits all these days.
Thank you, Pat. I know that it's complex. And your point is well taken. The faculty have different needs and different styles, and all the rooms are different, or many of the rooms are different.
But I would say if you do have ideas that are working or things that you've tried that absolutely don't work, feel free to send them along so we can try to catalog it a little better and hopefully guide people in the right direction and avoid going down a road if we know somebody already had a poor success with it. And we'll keep doing the same on our end.
So Lisa, I'm not sure what she's done in her class, but I know that Joe Leonard has been dealing with issues similar to what you described in her 48 student ecology class. And I think that in part what she did was to have students bring headsets like this, which don't cost very much. And then somehow she was using that to allow the 24 students in the class to interact with the 24 students not attending that day.
So it sounds like she's using that for the audio problems.
Yes.
So that they're joining in Zoom, yeah. And that's an option I haven't explored yet, but I'm thinking about possibly doing something like that. And I have flipped most of my lecture content. So I'm not doing a lot of lecturing. We're doing in-class activities because I wanted to make sure that students could get that content and had an opportunity to go through it on their own asynchronously, and they could play parts over, because I was worried about them hearing or having Zoom issues during any given class period. So that part has worked pretty well, and the students so far aren't complaining about having to do somewhat extra work. But yeah, it's definitely been challenging. I didn't realize I had so many options in my PowerPoint to select, so Stacy DeLuz helped me with that, because I was having problems where what the students in the class were seeing was different than the students that were on Zoom. And so that was something that was a little bit of a stumbling block for me. But yeah, it's definitely been challenging. And I do think, because I teach junior level students, they're not having the organizational problems with issues, time management, maintaining a calendar, things like that, that Crystal is seeing.
So I would like to say I would be very interested in hearing, you know, as people survey their students and get the idea of what the students perceive the experience to be. The feedback that I'm getting is faculty are a little frustrated, but the students actually are not that unhappy with the format we have. You know, with what Leslie read, and from what I'm hearing, they're less happy with the asynchronous, but the people who have the modified on campus and are on Zoom, I think that from the instructor's perspective, that's very clunky. I'm not sure the students all feel that way. They like the structure, of nothing else, of I have class from 10 to 10:50. I'm sitting in my dorm room, wherever, and I'm just watching it and taking notes or whatever, but they like that structure, and they're pretty happy with that. And again, we're hearing if they can be face-to-face, most of them, the majority would prefer to be in class if at all possible.
Leslie, for the feedback you shared, and just going off of Dr. Nguyen's comment, do we know percentage-wise what it is? Like, usually when you get feedback, it is sort of negative, and then, you know, you wish you would hear more of the positive feelings, but it doesn't always happen that way. So do we have any sense of what percentage of students didn't say anything and maybe they're perfectly fine?
No, we really don't know. And Rob, do you remember, was there Was it yesterday in academic cabinet, Jason Nicholas was wondering about doing another survey, or there was a question about whether we should do more additional student surveying. Because we don't know. What we have is anecdotal information. We don't know if it's skewed towards students who are the younger on-campus students. I'm also very interested in the perception is particularly important when we talk about retention and anxiety. The other piece of it, though, will be once we start getting in assessment information. How is this affecting student learning? Are we seeing students perform differently on their assessment activities? And there's a lot that we just don't know at this point. I'm fascinated that students do seem to like being zoomed in. As an instructor, I would feel anxious about doing that because the management of that would be distracting for me. But I think it's really interesting. We don't have any sort of formal survey or data collection at this point. Be a really interesting project for a Scholarship of Teaching and Learning project to really review what's going on in the classes and how students are responding to it.
And again, Crystal, when I read the student comments or the comments we're collecting, I'm not sure that I find all of them to be negative. I think that there's some positives there. And you know, well, there's things they don't like, and there's certainly some anxiety. There's always some anxiety with freshmen that just, it's all different. And it's a little hard when they don't have, you know, that face-to-face where you can walk up to your instructor at the end of class. Although those of us who have taught freshmen in the past know that many of them won't walk up to you at the end of class either. So, you know, they just go to their friends, and their friends don't know any more than they do. But there's something comforting in seeing their faculty member, even if it's just on Zoom. Also, our students are a lot more comfortable on their computers and on their phones than many of us who are, you know, a little older than the technology. So, you know, I mean, I still have kids who are in high school, and I have a daughter who's a student here, and, you know, jumping on FaceTime with their friends, that's something they do all the time. They're happy to communicate with people on a little screen.
Yeah, I'm interested. I appreciate the reminder that some of these observations that the students are having, like it's hard to do self-learning. The idea that this is always a factor. It's now they're looking at it through this COVID lens, as opposed to just this is what college is sometimes. But I can see their anxieties of it not being what they've been expecting for the last 12 years. They had a vision for what college would be, and this isn't it. This isn't the vision that I would have had a year ago for how the semester would be starting.
And I think it's important to recognize it's not just the academic changes, but also the social and the whole college experience is greatly altered. So you also have to think about how much of that is impacting how they're perceiving even the classroom, because they can't all join in the cafeteria together. There's social distance restrictions on campus. There's limited campus activities and gathering of groups and size limits. So you know, the whole campus experience, fall sports being canceled, some of them. So that whole experience is not what they dreamed about in high school. And that's got to impact, in my mind, how they're also perceiving their classroom academic experience.
So I've got another general question that somebody was asking me about this morning. I didn't really have a good answer for that. And that is like how to deal with students missing class or assignments or exams. And so we certainly don't want students to come to class, anything that has a face-to-face component if they are ill. There are HIPAA reasons for like not requiring that they provide documentation. On the other hand, anybody who's taught a class of significant size has had some bad apples who like don't do the work and then expect special treatment and want to make it up sometimes at the very last minute. And so how do we balance the like clear health concerns, which are much more prominent this year, with like sorting out, is somebody scamming me and doesn't really have a legitimate reason for missing out on the assigned work?
Difficult question.
So I don't have an answer for that. I will say one of the other comments that Chris Greer made yesterday at Academic Cabinet was related to the challenges of students having these excused absences, especially the ones who are in quarantine, where they're absent for an extended period of time from any face-to-face component that might be there. Chris was pointing out that that's actually one of the times that students like the synchronous opportunity because they aren't feeling like they're getting a quick response or the guidance that they would like from faculty when they're in quarantine. They know they need to keep up, but they don't know how to do it. And that one I think is going to be a struggle for faculty too, that how they manage that. It's not like the athlete that might be gone just 2 days while they go downstate. It might be the athlete being gone for a couple weeks is a different level of excused absence and making up work.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge because as faculty members, it's hard to let go of not doing everything this semester that you always would do. And what I mean by that is, I think that we can't just do it. It's not going to be a copy, you know. And maybe we realize that, but even like in the content and the pace, and then these kind of questions with the flexibility, this is just all different. And we want to be compassionate to our students, but we want to be fair to everybody. So it's just so uncharted. It's really hard.
John, I think you raised some excellent questions, and I don't really know if I have exact answers. I think we do have to be flexible. We do have to assume that most students won't say they're sick to get out of an exam and not really be sick, just want the extra time. I do think sending friendly reminders out, hey, you have an assignment due tomorrow at midnight in the Dropbox in EduCat. If you're not going to make that assignment because you're ill, I expect to hear from you ahead of time. You could do some things like that. I do think we're going to have to be somewhat flexible. And if you see a student maybe that you've had a repeat pattern and you suspect they're abusing the system, then you might have to deal with that person individually. I know in my syllabus, I have the same policy this semester that I've always had, that if a student needs to do a makeup exam, that I reserve the right to use an alternate version of the exam. So they may not get the same exam that their classmates had. And I don't usually do that unless somebody misses a second exam. So once they have their second, I can't come in to take a scheduled exam. My exams are online, so anybody that is in quarantine is going to be able to do that unless they're actually in isolation and sick. So they should be able to take the exam with their classmates no matter what. So that's one thing that people could do, is switch to online. But yeah, I think we're going to have to be flexible. I've already had students in quarantine, and you just have to be flexible and try to have faith that they're not trying to.
Yeah, it's not an easy question, but I just wanted to bring it up to get input from what others had encountered. Rob, I think you were out when I asked, but I was just bringing up the issue of student excuses for missing class, and that we certainly don't want them to come to class when they're sick and that they're entitled to make up the work. But some students will give false excuses for missing a class.
Yeah, and we, I think we certainly realize that some students will take advantage, and it seems like those are the students that end up crossing themselves up, and then we find out that they're the ones who, you run into in town the day they're supposed to be so sick that they can't take the exam, or, their classmates rat them out when they realize that they're doing better on the exams, and they say, that they're not sick. But we're going to be unusually trusting this semester, and that's the reality of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, I like the point that has been made. I think Lisa was talking about it when she was answering the question about how you're most likely to see a pattern rather than it happening one time. If you have a really large class, it might be hard to track those patterns also.
So I did get a response back from Jim Gadzinski about the FYE modules. All students are still required to do FYE modules. I don't have the outline yet. Jose Garcia will send that to me, but they haven't all completed them yet. Some of them did them in the summer, but some of them are still working through them. They may not finish them until registration begins for next semester. That's actually when the registration hold goes into effect, is for next semester. So, or they have this semester to do them. So that's one other thing that they're trying to work through on their own with time management. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? We had identified a few issues that could be up for discussion. If we had had a large group here today, we would have given some opportunities to break into small groups, but we are naturally a small group anyway. But is there any other thing that you'd like to talk about or that you'd like us to explore for you? Lisa, yes.
Yeah, this is directed to Pat. I'm also wondering, and I'm guessing it might be the same answer as you gave me for the audio. I'm also wondering if there's any possibility of getting second computer monitors in the classrooms, because if we are teaching with the modified on-campus model next semester, which it seems likely we will be, it would be really helpful, I think, to have a second monitor. I know some faculty are bringing their own to class. It would make it a lot easier to see the people on Zoom and manage a PowerPoint. And maybe John's experienced this as well. I'm finding it very much very stressful to try to manage the PowerPoint and my Zoom attendees and the chat, as I mentioned before, on such a small laptop monitor.
Yeah, I haven't played with it as much, but I know that there are already some faculty that were bringing their own monitors to do that. because they were having limited success with that as well. It's definitely something to explore if that's what the faculty want. And monitors are actually fairly cheap to add. And I think it'll become a question of those that don't use it. We found things that faculty don't use sometimes get abused a bit and pulled out of the way. And so because you know, it only works if it stays there. Plus it adds another level of complexity, because ideally it'll work when you plug it in and you're late for getting your class started. And if it doesn't, that's one more thing to have to juggle, I guess, if you will. So while it may work for some or most, it might be another problem for others. And it does require.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do other people think it would be helpful, like John, to have a second monitor?
Yeah, if I could get the students to turn their cameras on, but the extra sort of technology to manage is a little intimidating aspect of that, but it would be nice to be able to see them and see your presenter view and have the slides up on the screen, hopefully all work at once. You know, I think that would be nice if, you know, if like Pat said, you could plug it in and it all worked. And
I can tell you one thing, Lisa, that we did have a problem with, and they actually sent it in a little ways ago to Zoom as a feature request. Once you have them up on your screens, you can't swap them. So let's say you connect and all of a sudden your students are on the screen and your PowerPoint's on the little side screen. And there's no way in their desktop client to just easily switch them like you would think there should be. So I don't know, sometime this summer we said that you should really add that, and I haven't seen that they've added it yet. So something to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Well, since we're sort of getting toward the end, I have a question for the Zoom people here, since we're talking about multiple monitors. So in the past, when we were in a group like this and someone was sharing their screen, so then I had the group there along the side, and if I change the size of the screen that Matt's sharing, I can have it in gallery view, so it's one, horizontal or vertical column, or I can slide it over. I can get the gallery view. But it used to be that I could change that so that I had just one little box or others, and I don't seem to have that function anymore. And I can't grab this and move it to another screen like I used to. I used to put the people up on my other screen, and I can't do that any longer. Is it something that changed, or something that I'm doing differently?
I just did that, Rob.
I can't. So how did you do it?
I must be more tech savvy than you. I just tried.
Well, that's an easy answer.
I have no idea why it worked. And
well, I used to do it all the time, and then all of a sudden that functionality left.
So when I move my cursor between Matt's screen and the view, I get the little directional arrows that I can just drag one way or the other and make the slide bigger and the people smaller.
Yes, I can do that. But
Okay.
in the past, where the people are, I had several options. Instead of just speaker view at the top, I would have these options of,
Oh, okay.
speaker only, and I have just a little box at the top, or no view, and there was a thing you could grab onto so I could pull it onto another screen. Those are not there any longer. Now it's two choices: speaker view or gallery view, and that's it.
I think you need to be in full screen mode, I think, to do what you're asking.
I am in full screen mode. That's the.
You might be filling the screen, but you might not be in full screen mode, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Well, up at the top it says exit full screen, so I know I'm in full screen.
And then are you in side-by-side mode?
Well, that I don't know.
If you're in side-by-side mode, you'll only be able to slide back and forth the size of the PowerPoint and the gallery view.
Okay. I don't know that it changed anything from before, but it's just a little irritating sometimes. But that's not really what this meeting's for.
Yeah.
I can call Pat or someone. to
Yeah.
figure it out. And I don't teach a class, so I just have meetings. I spend a lot of time staring at this little screen.
Yep, I just switched mine, Rob, because I think I was seeing the same thing you were, and from the view options there, if you uncheck side-by-side mode, now I get the choices for the different views, the grid.
Oh, okay. Oh, you're right. Okay, we've fixed it.
Yay.
All right, now I'm as tech savvy as John Reavers. Thanks,
All
all.
right.
At least I learned something in this meeting. I learned several things, but
Yeah, I appreciate people showing up for this and sharing what's going on. I appreciate that this is a very difficult time for students and faculty, and there's just a lot for everybody to manage that's completely different than what we've had before, and any problems that we might have had before with communication or with time management are just huge now. That what might have been a tiny issue that we could overcome is now overwhelming. So unless there are any other comments, then I think we'll wrap this up. Anything else that you want to talk about?
just thanks for everybody who came and those who prepared things. I think it's great when we have these opportunities. So thank you for attending, and thanks to Leslie and Matt and Lisa and Stacy and Pat for all the work they're doing. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.